Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you all can hear me. Let me get a thumbs up or unmute yourself to let me know that you can actually hear me.
I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Gotcha.
Thank you. We're here again for EdTech Tuesdays with ATMs and friends, and today we're actually unwrapping the gifts of student voices. All right, my name is Pernell Allen. I'm the Alabama Technology and Motion Specialist located at the Regional In-Service Center, which is UAB. Go Blazers. Those other universities over to the left are where other ATEM specialists and the regional in-service centers are located across the state. That's my contact information if you need to contact me for any reason. Also, if you're on Twitter or X, you can follow me at UAB_ATEM. If you like this PD or any PD session hosted by ATEM, please use hashtag ATEMPD on any social media platform. Region 5 search the following LEAs. That's from Alabama Aerospace Aviation, Bessemer, Birmingham, Empower Community, Freedom Academy, Fairfield, I3 Academy, Jefferson County, Leeds, Legacy Prep, Magic City Acceptance Academy, Midfield, Tarrant, and Trustfield City
Okay, I'm on
Schools.
mute, right?
All right. So today's session is unwrapping the gift of student voices. That's our fall semester. And next semester we have here coming up, excuse me, is assistive technology, take a flight with drones, inspire creativity with Adobe Express, very similar to Canva, make math matter in K5, and may I teach you about engaging technology tools all next semester. And see that line up right there. Now, if you have not had an opportunity to listen to Tim Talks, that's our podcast hosted by my colleague Angela Clark and myself, where we try to bring awareness about various state initiatives and how they can benefit you, your school, or your district. Our latest two podcasts were right here, episodes 9 and 10. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music. And without any further ado, the reason that you're here today is to listen about unwrapping the gift of student voices brought to you by my colleague, friend, Tambra Clark. And I'm going to stop sharing at this time, Tambra, and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen right quick. Thank you for taking your time out today to see what's going on with unwrapping the gift of student voice. If those of you that are on do not know who I am, my name is Tambra Clark. I'm a library media specialist at Southampton Cade School. I've been an educator for over 19 years, with actually this being my 9th year in the library. So today we're going to just have a little fun, find out what's going on in the world of podcasting and how to incorporate that into your curriculum. Again, my name is Tambra Clark. I'm a library media specialist at Southampton Cade School in the Library of Innovation. I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator, and I oversee a student-run podcast called Bulldog Talk on the Edge. Bulldog Talk on the Edge is student-ran by our middle school students. We incorporated it. It actually started off as a couple of episodes for an assignment last year, and we just ran with it. We enjoyed what we were doing. The students loved it, and we just kept it going. So you can find Bulldog Talk on the Edge on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We're on most podcast platforms. In fact, even if you Google it, it'll come up. You'll be able to see it and listen to the recordings. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So if those of you who have joined us a little late, I would like for you to either scan the QR code, or I actually put a link in the chat where you can register, because I'm going to send you a copy of the resources that I'm going to share and a copy of this presentation at the end of this segment. So we're going to start off with the icebreaker. Imagine that. We're going to go into how powerful podcasting can be, podcasting essentials, overcoming the challenges, integration into the curriculum, and then we're going to close out with some fun. Let me minimize this because I'm not able to click. All right. So just for an icebreaker, let me go back right quick. If you can host a podcast, I just want to know your thoughts for the moment. If you can host a podcast, what topic would your podcast be about? I want you to put that in the chat. I want you to respond in the chat. If you can host any type of podcast of your choice, go ahead and add that to the chat. And I would like to see what your thoughts are when it came to podcasting. And I introduced my students to podcasting. We had to figure out what podcasting was. And then from there, I allowed the students to go into different podcasting episodes to see what they were interested in. So I wanted them to see what it was like to podcast and what other type of podcast topics were out there. And that also shared with me what their interests are. And then from their interests, I was actually able to see those interests come alive. So I'm seeing sports. Linda, she said books. I'm an avid reader. I love reading. So yes, books, traveling and books, educational choices, peer mediation, conflict resolution, computational thinking. I keep seeing travel and books. I keep seeing that. I'm also seeing special education reforms, American Sign Language, and then definitely reading is fun. So it's so much out there. It's a topic on almost anything that you can think of. All you need to do is just go to a podcast channel and Google it. Go to a podcast channel, search in that search bar, and you'll be able to find out what's going on. And this is what I did with my students. I was able to find their interests and what they were interested in, and also direct them to other podcasts that I knew about. So let's look and see and have a little chat about how podcasting can really reinvent your instruction. So just imagine a classroom where students' voices are amplified, their creativity is unleashed, and their passions are ignited. Now imagine that same classroom, but with a twist. Instead of traditional essays and presentations, students are creating their own podcasts. They're not just consuming content, they're producing it. They're sharing their unique stories and making their voices heard beyond the walls of classroom. This is the power of podcasting in education. And guess what? It's transforming the way we learn. All right. So I'm sorry about that. It keeps skipping on me. It said, what is the power of podcasting? Podcasts are a versatile, engaging, and impactful tool for educators and learners alike. Here's why they hold immense potential in the educational landscape. So I definitely did a lot of research before we actually began the podcasting because number one, I needed to know what I was doing. I needed to know what I was teaching. So let's look at accessibility. You can, like I said, you can find any type of topic, any type of subject related to podcasting. So reach anytime, anywhere. Podcast allows students to learn at their own pace, whether they are commuting, exercising, or relaxing at home. And this goes for us adults too. Inclusive learning. Students with visual impairments or those who prefer audio over text benefit from podcasts. Language learners can improve listening skills and comprehension, and then it's low cost and easy to access. Most of the platforms are free. Free platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts make it simple for educators and students to access content without significant cost. So yes, free 99. You do not have to pay for a lot of the subscriptions for certain podcasts. And then definitely if you subscribe to a podcast of your choice, you get those notifications about when a new episode is ready. Personalization. Self-paced learning. So when it comes to podcasting in that classroom, not just speaking, but listening, it's self-paced learning. Students can pause, rewind, and revisit complex topics as needed. Diverse content. Educators can curate podcasts that align with individual interests or learning goals. Students can explore topics not covered in their curriculum, such as career guidance, hobbies, or a niche in their certain fields. Student-created content, which is what we're doing over here with Bulldog Talk on the Edge. Teachers can encourage students to produce their own podcasts, empowering them to take ownership of their own learning. All right, and then we have engagement, and there's actually so much more. I can talk hours and hours on end about podcasting, but I'm just hitting those hot topics. Engagement, storytelling medium. Podcasts captivate listeners by combining narratives with auditory stimuli, such as music and sound effects. So we actually started towards the latter half of last year. We were just doing audio. We were just talking, but we had a receiver where we can make funny noises and claps and things like that. So once we started incorporating those sounds, those extra sounds in a podcast, it just took it to the next level for us. So multisensory learning, by hearing different voices, accents, and tones, students engage actively with the material. Collaborative opportunities, students and educators can work together to produce episodes, fostering teamwork and creativity. Podcasts can feature guest speakers, experts, or alumni to bring fresh perspectives into the classroom. So to begin, we started off with just certain episodes. We started off with the students working on episodes of their choice, topics of their choice. I did have to, of course, have the students go through some type of interview process to make sure this was appropriate. This was engaging and entertaining. And from there, we were able to identify and make a script for each episode. So I want you to stop what you're doing. I want you to go to the website Menti. I just need to get a little survey to see from your perspective. I want to know what you're thinking when it comes to podcasting. You're here for a reason. Either you want to incorporate podcasting into your curriculum, you want to find out more about podcasting, or you're just here to just see what's really going on in the world of podcasting. What I want you to go to is menti.com. And I want you to type in this code, and I created a word cloud profile. I want to see what is everybody's perspective when it comes to podcasting. What skills do you think students can gain by creating their own podcast? I'm seeing it firsthand, but it's still so much more I'm still learning just from this experience and making observations of the students. I would like to see, what skills do you think students can gain by creating their own podcast? You have 3 options. If you choose to use one option, that's fine. So I'm seeing professional soft skills, collaboration, creativity. I'm seeing a lot of people are saying creativity, and that's true. Communication, analyzing, real world skills, independence. Okay, so we have about 16 responses. Okay. Communication. So communication is getting bigger and bigger. Yes, effective communication. When the students go back after listening to their podcast, they either cringe because they don't like what they're saying, or they don't like how they're articulating, or they cringe, or they're comfortable. So when the students are able to go back and listen to what they're talking about and listen to what's being said, that's definitely a big deal, because they can pivot, they can make those changes. And it's so much into the world of podcasting: effective speech, effective communication, effective articulation. So let's go look at that one more time. Let me see if any changes been made. I saw about 20 people responded, 26. So yes, notice we have creativity, communication, and independence. Yes, once they get to talking enrolling. So much is coming to them. Even when it comes to the students interviewing adults in certain careers, they're able to go off script because now they're thinking, now they're processing what's going on, what's being said, and they're being creative. They're questioning certain topics that's coming to them when it comes to those interviews and conversations. But yes, we keep seeing communication, respect for others, respect professional soft skills. Yes, technical is definitely one because students are learning how to hook up mics, unplug mics, troubleshoot if something doesn't sound right, if a volume is off. And yes, we have everybody that's playing a certain part or a certain role when it comes to that podcasting. Let me go to the next. All right. So if I probably need to check and make sure you can hear, but these are a few of my students. We did like a mini interview because I wanted to get inside what their perspective was on podcasting. This is one of the episodes they created. It was called the Story Mode Podcast, and it was on a theory of Caroline. It was a book that came out many, many moons ago, and they created a video on it, a movie on it, and then there's so many theories on what happened to Caroline. So we did read the book, and then I branched off and allowed the students to go on and watch the movie. I believe it was on Netflix at the time. Can you let me know if you can hear? If somebody can come off of mute, because I don't know it when I shared it, if it allowed me to share the audio. Were anyone able to hear? Can someone come off of mute and let me know?
Yes, I did hear it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to play it again from beginning. It's about 2 minutes. And this is their perspective on what they felt about podcasting and what they did when they started.
What was my favorite thing about the podcast? My favorite thing about the podcast is where I got to talk about the whole thing. And I also got to ask questions because we were doing corners. So like basically where we all knew we put it together. And we talked about it on the podcast, and that was very cool. I want to say not a good podcast. So it's a ride quick like a week or so because Monday Miss Clark, she talked about what we were going to do then Tuesday. We figured out what we were going to do then Wednesday. We started writing our script down and what we were going to say. And then Thursday, we started on the podcast, but then it was time to go. And then Friday, we got it done. We came back. Did y'all like the videos in your I did like the group I was in because the two people that I was in the group with, they were actually pretty cool, and it was cool talking to them. But I think it was 3 people, but it was very cool because we have each had scripts to do, and that was very cool. What's up, night? Would you like to go next door? Yes, that was funny. The people in my group helped. They like throughout the podcast, they were just funny, and yeah, that's it. Did y'all like the idea? I did like the idea I was doing because we all knew about the corner thing. So when we thought about it, it was a very cool idea, and we did it. I like the idea because my whole group, like, they knew what skincare they use and what they wanted to say and stuff like that. Yeah, I like that. Well, y'all heard about the podcast. Did y'all think the invite for now? Yeah. When I first found out about the podcast, I was scared, but because I never did a podcast before. But when I did it, it was very cool. I liked it a lot, and I liked everything I talked about on the podcast. Me too. But when I first got on the podcast, I didn't want to do it at first, and then throughout the podcast, I actually enjoyed it and liked it. And yeah, I want to do another podcast again.
All right, so this was raw, uncut footage about students just talking about what they enjoyed about the podcast. We were probably a few months in, probably about 4 or 5 episodes in, and the students were getting a gist of podcasting and articulating and scripting. And this was their perspective. It was raw, uncut footage. And I just wanted to see what was going on with what they were thinking. So I learned to document what's going on with these podcasts because from beginning to end, you definitely see a big change. All right. So when it comes to podcasting, these are just pretty much the essentials on how I got started with Bulldog Talk on the Edge. I do have a close friend who has her own podcast channel. She's been doing it for many years. So she did come up with, she created a video for my students on what worked for her. And we shared it with the students. The students were able to interact with her. But when it comes to essentials, preparation is key. You can't just blindly go into, I'm going to start a podcast. You need to know what you want to talk about, who your audience is going to be, how you're going to keep your audience engaged, and definitely the equipment. Okay, so I started off with preparation because we need to know what are we going to research? What are we going to talk about? So to begin, define your purpose. I had the students to decide whether the podcast will be a teaching tool, student-led project, a showcase for the school, community, or stories. We set clear goals and outcomes, such as enhancing learning, promoting creativity, or developing communication skills. My goal was to focus on their communication skills because I was so focused on how they were going to articulate. Choose a topic or theme. You need to identify subjects that align with your curriculum or student interest.
Bye-bye.
Examples, book reviews, historical debates, science, experiments, SEL discussions, and much more. So this right here was the first tool that we used when it came to researching. And I will share this, those who completed that form, I will share all the resources that I share with you guys here. So this is a double-sided page. You got research on this side. What is your topic going to be about? Why are you researching this topic? What are you talking about when it comes to this research? What does the research say? And then you need receipts. References. You can't just blindly say what you're going to be talking about, the content you're talking about, without not letting us know where this content came from. Where did this information come from? And I always made sure the students were able to cite their sources. When you're giving out valid information, you definitely want to cite where you got your information from. And that's the copyright in me. That's the library media specialist in me. We don't believe in just stealing material and making it our own. So I always made sure the students cited their sources. And then what did you learn? What did you actually learn new? Because this right here is gold. This is the secret sauce, as I would tell the students. They're going to refer back to this to help them create their script. All right. So on the other side of that page, you have the podcast planner. You have your name, your podcast mates, and then you're going to create your script. Using the research and the data that you were researching and the information that you were coming up with, you are going to identify what you're going to talk about. Now, we did start off with whole scripts like sentences and paragraphs. And at the beginning, because it was just becoming, they needed to know. I didn't want to blindly just, let's talk about these bullet points. No, I had to really go into detail on what items they were going to talk about and how they were going to talk about it. And then you have your format. Is it going to be one person talking, roundtable discussion? Is it going to be a narrative? Is it going to be co-hosting, interview, or other? And then what type of audience? Who are you talking to? What preferred audience are you trying to engage with this type of information? All of this is vital for establishing your podcast. And you're giving these students a voice. And when I tell you, when they know they have a voice, that gives them ownership of their learning, especially when it comes to certain areas in the curriculum and subjects that we're talking about related to education. So you're going to structure your podcast. Typical podcast components. You have your intro music and your welcome message. So when it comes to Bulldog Talk on the Edge, we have our intro music, but what we're going to start doing is include a welcome message. Welcome to Bulldog Talk on the Edge. So we always have our intro and outro music, and then the students introduce themselves coming in. But this year we're going to do something a little different because each year I want something different to be done related to the podcast. You don't want the same type of podcast for 10 years. Okay, so you're going to identify the main content or the interview. So whether you're going to interview, and that goes back to the format, what type of podcast it's going to be. And then the closing remarks or call to action, that's going to be at the closing of the podcast. Are you going to tell somebody to reach out and go ahead and read that book, or go ahead and do more research? So when you have a call to action, it's usually telling the audience how to move forward with that topic they were talking about. And sometimes it's a part 2 to our podcast. So for us as educators, and the research does say, keep the episodes short, between 5 to 15 minutes for student projects to maintain engagement. Mind you, this is for middle school students. So keeping those episodes short, you definitely want to keep it engaged, unless you really have a very, very hot topic. Unless you have a very, very hot topic and it's something that can keep them engaged, yeah, keep it going. Keep it going. But other than that, try and keep it between 5 and 15 minutes. And it's nothing wrong with that, because mind you, depending on the topic, you have other students that's going to be listening to this episode. You have other students that's going to be listening to their peers. So you have to keep that in mind. And then you write your script or outline. Prepare key points to avoid rambling, but keep room for improvement. Okay, there's always room for improvement. And these are just the planning portion of it. Now, when it comes to the technical portion, you don't need much. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. When we started our podcast, we started off with an iPad and some headphones. That's all we had. That is all we have now. Mind you, we do have a 4-man podcast setup now, but that's what we started. We had humble beginnings. We started off with our iPad Pro. We used our voice recorder, and then the students went in and I taught them how to modify the audio through Canva. Yes, you can modify the podcast audio through Canva. So when it comes to those essentials, like I said, I started off with really 2 things. I had a cord, actually 3. iPad, a cord, and iPad, cord, headphone, and microphone. I am so sorry. iPad, I had some type of cord that connected the cord to the microphone, and then I had my headphone. So I had 4 items. That's all I had. I did not have the arms. I didn't have data storage. I didn't have audio. I didn't have any of that. The storage that I did have was Canva, and it was free. So you're going to definitely want to start off with it does not have to be expensive, but these are the type of microphones that would be perfect or ideal for your podcast. A dynamic microphone, great for recording in untreated spaces. Untreated mean you don't have that studio type software or studio room. Okay, so it's not able to pick up everything. You don't want it to pick up everything. So those are those untreated spaces. You have headphones, which are closed back. That means it covers the whole ear. Closed back covers the whole ear, and it monitors the audio without bleeding. And these are the type of headphones I would definitely not require, but insist you getting. Technica, ATH, M550X, Sony. These are good resources. Audio interface. It converts your microphone's analog signal to digital for your computer. Necessary for XLR microphones and Scarlett PreSonus audio bucks. I know it sounds foreign, but once you get into that space, you start learning more about what type of software works for you, what type of data storage works for you, what type of equipment works for you. Some are easy to work with. We do have professional grade. However, we only use a certain component when it comes to that, because we are still working with kids and we're still progressing the students. Computer. computer or iPad for recording and editing. So yes, I would suggest a receiver once you get to where you need to go, but just the basics, these are just the basics for a computer for recording and editing, ensuring it has sufficient processing power and storage. So these are just the essentials. It's the basic. Like I said, it's basic. Nothing high-end, nothing high-end expensive. These are just something basic that you may already have. Canva's free. If you're an educator, you have free Canva premium subscription. Like I said, that's where we started. The students started uploading their information, their audio in Canva and creating flyers to advertise it. All right. So again, I'm reviewing the podcasting formats from that initial page. You have exploring the podcast formats. You have solo, a simple monologue podcast where the host speaks directly to the listeners for the duration of the show. You have one person. You have roundtable, multiple co-hosts, 4, and that's usually what we have, who engage in conversations around the same topic or theme of the episode. And they're not, I had to teach my students, don't overtalk. If one person is talking, let them finish and then let the next person finish. And that's where those scripts to come in, that they knew their cue to come in. You have a narrative. These tell a story, either in a single episode or over the course of a full season, normally with more creative production elements. You have co-hosting. 2 people co-host the show and share the work of writing, discussing hot topics, and interviewing others. We have interviewing, which was very popular among our students. We had we have doctors to come in, we had lawyers to come in, we had airline pilots, we just had a lot of people to come in. A lot of the students actually had connections with people who were in different careers. And then I had the people that I knew, my network of colleagues and my network of peers who I was familiar with would come in and allowed the students to interview them. And the students would come up with 10 questions. If we knew who the person was or we were able to look them up on Google them, they would get that information and they would create about 10 questions for that person they were interviewing. And those questions would be sent to that person a few days prior to the interview, so they will be prepared to answer those questions when they come in. So we definitely have a system set up in place for podcasts, and the students are well aware and they love it. And then you have other formats. Documentary podcasts build a story in each episode and typically have immersive production. And then docudrama podcasts are narrative type shows that are based on real world events. So we haven't gotten to those other formats, but we've definitely worked on co-hosting, interviewing, solo. We've done everything else. And the students, they know what type of podcast they want to work on. Once we were able to establish what a podcast was and what they needed to do, the students were able to just really hone in on what they really enjoyed doing. As you can refer back to the video, I allowed them to get with who they connected with, who they really connected with and who they gelled with. And because of those connections, the students did an awesome job when it came to those podcasting. All right, so you definitely will have challenges, and I definitely did come across a few challenges while podcasting, defining clear purpose. So at the beginning, the students, they did not have that understanding of what that purpose was. They would start on the topic, and then before you know it, they were all over the place. And I had to let them know, hey, if I'm getting lost, your audience is going to get lost. So we would record a podcast, and I would let their peers listen to it in the classroom, and we would critique the podcast. So we were able to identify what needed to work or what needed to change and how we needed to pivot. So clear and defined purpose. Challenge, lack of focus can dilute your content. So the solution would be clearly define the podcast purpose and target audience. Key. Target audience. Decide if it's educational, entertaining, motivational, or a mix. For example, a podcast to simplify science topics for middle school students, okay? Engage your audience. The challenge would be keeping students interested. And here we go. One of the solutions would be use storytelling techniques and relatable examples. The students used Caroline. They loved it. I did not realize how popular that was, especially when it came to that theory. It thrived. It came from an actual book. And for the students to actually want to talk about these theories from what happened in that book, that touched my soul right there. Include interactive elements such as Q&A, session polls, or feedback. Collaborate with guests such as teachers, alumni, or experts. Yes, we did bring in teachers. We have a teacher that owns a farm out here. She brought in some chickens, and you can hear the chickens chirping in the middle of the podcast. We brought a teacher in who owns a restaurant. She actually brought in food for the students to sample in the midst of the podcast. That was a whole experience, okay? And then you have overcome technical hurdles. Go ahead and troubleshoot. If you need to make sure everything is ready to go prior to podcasting. Do you know what happened? What really hurt my feelings? If we got a really good episode of a podcast, we go through the whole session of podcasting, you interview or whoever you're talking to, and and you realize that you wasn't even recording it. That hadn't happened. Let me knock on wood. That had not happened, but that would just be a waste of time and a waste of talent. So definitely make sure everything is already in place when it comes to podcasting. I always have the students troubleshoot to make sure they can hear. Can you hear me on mic 1? Test 1, test 2. Can you hear me on mic 2? And everybody put their thumbs up or thumbs down. So we have somebody who's controlling the audio to make sure everybody can hear at a decent volume. Use a quiet, non-verbal, use quiet spaces to improve the sound quality. We did have a situation where you can hear you can hear the air conditioner, that buzzing. So that's where you leverage those free tools like Audacity and Anchor to edit those sounds, okay? So being able to have access to those resources. You're going to have challenges. You may come into challenges, you may not, but just being able to identify possible hurdles. All right, some more challenges that you may come across. Balancing podcast production and other responsibilities. I'm going to repeat myself. I am a library media specialist at a K-8 school. I have a dedicated middle school that comes to me, but however, I see the whole school. I see kindergarten through 8th grade. So although I see that dedicated 6th, 7th, and 8th, I do have other lessons and other projects that's mandated to make sure the students are able to get what they need. They're mandated to be taught. So content calendars. We came up with a content calendar on when we're going to record, how we're going to record, and who we're going to record. That calendar have worked wonders. So our last recording was actually in September. Our last posted recording was in September. However, we have been recording for the past 2 months, but we're going to start uploading over break, so that way they're going to be coming out each week. However, we weren't able to record like we used to because we had a few projects coming up. My students were showcasing an app. They had to create an app. My students had to work on a pitch, an EdTech challenge pitch. So we had other items going on. And this creation of the calendar really helped to improve what we needed to do in the production. Batch record, and that's what we were doing. We were batch recording. I was able to get one dedicated day where I had about 3 people come in. I have the calendar on the whiteboard. The students sign up with who they want to interview. And then we went from there. And those people that came in, I would pull the students, they would interview, and everything's recorded. We all have it on this very, very micro memory drive. And when we batch record, they just need to be uploaded. So, and then assign roles. Like I said at the beginning, you have a student that's over the audio, making sure everybody can hear, everybody sounds right. Even when it comes to our guests, making sure they're able to hear and we're able to hear them when it comes to recording. You're working as a team. Ensure accessibility. Challenge, reaching diverse groups of students. So we're not always talking to the same group. When it comes to those transcripts, you can go into Podbean. You can go into Apple Podcasts. You can go into Google and Spotify. Those transcripts are the words, the audio that's put into text. And you can always go back and read them and identify what it is that you're looking for within that text. So publish transcripts for students with hearing impairments or those who prefer reading. Choose platforms accessible across devices. Like I said, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Keep episodes concise, around 10 to 20. I'm going to go back to 5 to 15. I meant to put that. But also those attention spans. You definitely want to keep those students' attention spans. And that's why I say 5 to 15. The research says 5 to 15. But when it comes to attention span, I guess they're giving them about 5 more minutes, which would be up to 20. Keep it fun and relatable. Challenge, balancing education with entertainment. Use humor, music, sound effects where appropriate. Relate content to students' everyday lives and interests and share personal stories. A group of my students wanted to talk about personal hygiene. I thought that was so interesting. They enjoyed talking about personal hygiene. It was a group of girls. They wanted to talk about skincare. I just thought that was awesome. They were researching skincare. They spoke about what they use, what worked for them, what didn't work. I just thought that was totally awesome. All right, integration into the curriculum. And if you can, I'll also click on this for about 1 minute, but integrating podcasting into a curriculum can enhance student engagement. It sure does. Whatever topic you're working on, if you can find a podcast related to that topic to introduce that to them, even if it's fractions, I'm telling you, there's podcasting on fractions. If you can start find a podcast that can help introduce your topic, that's just bringing that curriculum, that's bringing that lesson to the next level. Integrating podcasts into a curriculum can enhance student engagement, provide diverse learning opportunities, and foster critical thinking. Here's a step-by-step guide on how to do it effectively. Identify the learner's objectives. That comes with your instruction. Align podcasts with the curriculum goals and standards. Use podcasts to introduce, reinforce, or expand on topics. Example, for a history class, incorporate episodes about significant historical events or interviews with historians. Select relevant podcasts. Choose podcasts that are age appropriate and aligned with the subject matter. One thing I want to make sure you do, you always listen to that podcast before you allow the students to listen to it. You definitely want to do that. You do have some podcasts that can say they're talking about one topic, but be totally different. So I will always make sure you do that just to cover yourself and make sure you're getting what you need out of that podcast. Choose podcasts that are age appropriate. Curate episodes that are engaging, storytelling, and credible information. Yes, credibility is a big deal because there's so much out there in the world. The students have access to anything out there. So you definitely want to make sure it's credible. Platform, you have NPR, TED Ed, which is those TED Talks, BCC. They offer educational podcasts for all grade levels. Use podcasts as pre-lesson activities. Like I said, assign episodes as homework to prepare students for an upcoming lesson. You have them listen to a TED Talk or a podcast related to computer science because we're celebrating computer science this week. You have them find a podcast on coding and how it's relevant to computer science. And you have that discussion, have them assign it as homework. And then when you come back to school, let's have a discussion about it. What did you think was interesting about it? Provide guiding questions or worksheets for students to complete while listening. Example, in a biology class, assign a podcast about genetics before introducing the topic to the class. What I'm going to do right here, it's about 25 podcasts for students that are very engaging. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Like I said, I will provide you with these resources, but these are podcasts that will definitely take you to the next level. And yes, kindergarten and pre-K, yes, all of these podcasts. Yes, yes, yes. Kindergarten, can you believe that? Yes. They're talking about Quentin visit places associated with letters of the alphabet. There's so much out there. So these are a list of resources that I came across that was very valuable, and I shared it with my students prior to us creating our own podcast. All right, so let's go ahead and I want to just see where you're at when it comes to podcasting. What do you know about podcasting? What I'm going to do, I'm going to click on this Blookit. I would like for you to go to Blookit.com. Go to Blookit.com. Let me go back over here. I'm so sorry. Here it goes. Go to Blookit.com. And I want you to go in.
At Tambra,
Yes.
click that copy to join link and see if you can put that in the chat. That may be
Okay.
easier for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me go back to Zoom. All right, it's in the chat. So go to Blookit.com, click on that chat, and join. Oh, wait a minute, I think. I'm sorry about that. Hold on. I don't know if it's going to give them the same one. This was it. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to put a different one in there. I'm put a different one in there. I apologize about that. I think it timed out on me. I'm sorry. Join this one, please. Join this Blookit. All right. Give it about 10 more, about 1 more minute. And it's about 15 questions. This is an interactive Blookit. It's similar to Kahoot. It's definitely something fun, but it can help you identify the different components of podcasting. And I think it's just something awesome. I had my students playing with it earlier last week, and they had a ball. They did know most of the questions because we had been doing podcasts, and it was going on year 2 for some of my students. So this was definitely something fun and engaging. I'm going to go ahead and start, and you can join. If you join later, that's fine. All right. So how long is the ideal podcast episode duration? What platform is commonly used to distribute and listen to podcasts? We know that one. All right. We know that podcast. We know that it's Spotify. Yes. All right. Good job, Curiosity. All right. Which term best describes a person who creates a podcast? Now, we know that's easy. We know that's easy. And you know, the faster you respond with the correct answer. All right. And we know that's a podcaster, right? All right. What is a guest interview podcast? What is a guest interview podcast? All right. A podcast where the host interviews different guests in an episode, which is, of course, my students' favorite. Okay, Curiosity, Christy, Sherry. All right. How can a podcast be beneficial for learning? How can a podcast be beneficial for learning? All right, they offer a convenient way to learn on the go. All right. Curiosity, I think you have your own podcast. What is a scripted podcast? That's easy. What is a scripted podcast? All right, a podcast that follows a scripted narrative or storyline. Okay, we had another curiosity went down for a little bit. Which of the following is a benefit over podcasting over traditional radio? Now that's interesting. I'd like to see this. Which of the following is a benefit of podcasting over traditional radio? All right, podcast for on-demand listening. Yes, you can listen to it anytime you feel. Okay, what happened? We got Laura this time. Go, Laura. All right, what is a typical format of a podcast episode? Audio or video interviews or discussion, live streaming sessions, are you for real, or infographics? All right, audio or video interviews. Yes, yes. All right, Christy's back up, I see. All right, which of the following is not a popular podcast genre? Which is not a popular podcast genre? All right, gardening. Although we do have podcasts on genre on gardening, but it's just not as popular. How can listeners stay updated when a new episode is released? How can they stay updated? By stalking them, by following the podcasters on social media. That's a good way. By sending an email to the podcaster or subscribing to the podcast. You have to actually subscribe to the podcast. I'm sorry. Okay, so what is another one? Which of these is an example of on-demand aspect of podcasting? All right, and we have listened to a live radio. Okay, let's go next. We have about 3 more. What is a podcast aggregator? Okay, now that's due. I want to see what the response will be for this. A software that records podcasts, a platform that hosts live podcast sessions, or an app or platform that collects and organizes podcasts for easy listening. All right, an app or platform that collects and organizes podcasts for easy listening. That would be like Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. What is monetization in the context of podcasting? Monetization, think about it. Monetization. Give me my money. All right, I think everybody knew the answer to that. Generating revenue. Yep. All right. We have 2 more. What is a podcast? Now, we know what that is. Is it a type of audiobook, a type of music album? I don't like podcasts or a digital audio or video program available for streaming and download. We know that answer. And the correct answer is, yeah. All right, and I think we're on the last one. What does RSS stand for in the context of podcasts? Really simple syndication, remote source sharing, real-time streaming service, or run summer sun. All right, real simple syndication. So, for those who did not know, I have a gift for the winner for first place. And curiosity is first place. I would like for you to send me your email in a chat, and I have something for you via email. Very good, guys. So let me go back. That was a little fun. I just wanted to see what you knew when it came to podcasting and what you're learning up to this point. All right. So this is Bulldog Talk on Edge, created by students for students. And these are some of the highlights of what we've done the past few years. This is the group of girls that you saw in the video. This was their podcast. So after they record the podcast, usually they have a name for their podcast, but depending on how the conversation go, they may pivot and change it. I gave them free range to change their topics, but the students, we started off using Canva. The students go in after it's uploaded. I've taught them how to upload it, but they create their own flyers for podcasting. They create their own flyers to promote their podcast. And then we go from there. We promote it. And when we first started podcasts, first started our podcast, the students converted their episode. They put it on QR codes and we passed them out to the whole school so the students can listen to them at their leisure. So that was definitely fun. And the students were able to identify and track how many episodes were being downloaded. So our very first podcast, I believe, is it up here? The first few, you got Story Mode and then Hoop Dreams. Those were the first few podcasts that the students created and recorded. The students have also been highlighted in Alabama, in the Alabama newspaper, Birmingham Times, on their podcast. And they've just been having fun. This is an episode, if you can see the students looking at some chicks. That's the episode where one of the teachers brought in some chicks during the episode and they recorded, and the students were able to pick the teacher's brain about what it's like to own a farm. The lady at the bottom of the middle blue flyer, she's the lady who brought in food from her restaurant, and the students just have fun. They're able to know what type of adults are walking around here. They're able to get a little closer to their teachers. It's just an awesome experience. It helps build communication skills. The students are able to just go back and hone in on what they need to work on when it comes to not only research, but just speaking. But for me, from my experience, I'm learning that those communication skills is top notch, because they definitely want to express what they're saying and how they're saying and get whatever's off their chest. And it's just an awesome experience. All right, so that concludes my professional development. I hope you guys were able to get a little bit out of it and identify how you can bring these students' voices to life. My personal information, my professional information, if you can scan the QR code, what I'll also do is give you my credentials so that way you can go in and email me anytime. But I definitely enjoyed this. I love talking about podcasting. The students love podcasting. And I really hope you guys really start thinking and go ahead and start your podcast. I'm telling you, the students will love it. They'll be thinking about what they want to talk about, especially when it comes to something that's relatable to them, and then bringing those adults in different careers. We had a whole airline pilot out here, and now I have students that's interested in flying airplanes. We had a lawyer out here. She practices, but she was also ex-military, and she went on and spoke about how important it is for students who wants to go into the military. You have military soldiers, people in the military who are flying drones, and she went on and spoke about that hand-eye coordination. Just because you're a gamer does not mean that's a negative situation. She was saying how the military is actually looking for gamers because they need people to be able to operate those drones. But it's just been an awesome experience, and it's still an awesome experience moving forward with what's to come. So we're honing in on those skills, and I'm excited about what's in store for the future when it comes to this group of students working on their podcast. Is there any questions? All right, that concludes my podcast session, and I really hope everyone enjoyed it.
Well, awesome job, Tambra, as always. And one thing I want to mention to you all, if you enjoyed this, you can also hear Tambra on Tim Talks in January. We'll send that out to you all. And at this time, we will conclude this episode. We'll stay on for a little while for anyone who has questions. We'll stop the recording as well.